to start with, let's go ahead and start with the military slide deck. That's the longest.
Military one, okay.
Yeah. That's the longest one, and has the most, most detail and most benefit that everybody will need. So Jim Fain and David Bourne are Jim leads. He's the director of the International Military Student Division, and Dave Bourne reports to him. He's the field studies program director or program manager, I think. So those are the two individuals that we deal mostly with in this program. They're completely responsible for the International Military Student Command and General Staff College program. And then they are our points of contact from a sponsor standpoint. Next slide. And also, if you have questions along the way, there's quite a number of slides here, so don't wait till the end unless you just want to. It's no problem to ask questions as we go along. These are, and I will tell you up front, I will not be able to speak to some of the details here like Dave or Jim would, but the point of this slide is the program is regulated by these entities. And don't ask me to explain the details about each one or any one of them, but that's who the military IMSD takes their direction from. Next slide. Okay, so this International Military Student Division, and the point of this is what I touched on. The International Military Student Office it says of record on Fort Leavenworth. They're really the owners of the program. They have complete responsibility for the international officers that participate in the program. So they provide, the program is made up of administration, academics, and then field studies. And the academics part is, that's the classroom studies that the officers will be part of. And the way it's broken down, typically it can vary just a little bit. They're set up into small groups for the academics. When they go to the classroom every day, there's typically a group of 16, and 15 of those are U.S. Army, also part of the Command and General Staff College, and the other one of the 16 is an international. So that's by design where they put internationals with American officers, and they stay together in that group for the year. And then the field studies program, that's what we're part of as sponsors, and that's designed to, as it says, expose the international military officers to certain facets of the U.S. people, political, military institutions. So they go on a number of field trips. You're going to see a schedule here coming up probably closer to the end, but they go on field trips. They go to state government, they go to federal government, they go to universities, they go to businesses. So they really experience, maybe more than any of us that are citizens, get to experience the various aspects of our country, how things work. And then as I said, sponsorship is part of that field studies program. Next slide. This is the organization that it shows where Jim Fain is the director, and then it shows, I guess, his chain of command above him, and then below that is the people at the admin and FSP lines. That's who we mostly will deal with. So David Bourne is one, and then Robert and Eric, we work quite a bit with them as well. And on the admin side, those individuals are helping with communications, like invitations to events, communications with sponsors, etc. So, but primarily it's going to be Dave and Jim that we will interact with. Next slide. So this is the sort of a history background slide to show that since it started, which was in 1894, there have been 166 countries that have participated, and upwards of, or greater than 8,400 participants. A list of all the countries that have participated. Next slide. And then this, I've heard Jim and Mike say this is the, you know, there's not a program in the world that wouldn't love to be able to pop up a slide like this that says, you know, as a result of, or partly as a result of the officers participating in Command and General Staff College, they have gone on to, there's 27 heads of state, 3 sitting heads of state pictured below, more than 300 ministers, ambassadors, or representatives, more than 300 chiefs of staff, etc. So it's really an impressive list of accomplishments that these officers go on to do after they participate in Command and General Staff College. And so the 3 are, see if I can remember them. I know Rwanda, Singapore, and I believe the King of Bahrain are the 3 sitting heads of state. Bahrain on the left, Singapore, and then Rwanda. So next slide. This is the list of countries that are participating this year. We're still waiting to hear on 2 or 3 countries. It can be somewhat of an extensive process to get certain officers approved to participate, and so there's still 3 or 4 countries out there that we're waiting to hear. But for the most part, this is our list of countries for this coming year. Next slide. So this is a further breakdown from that past slide that had the org chart. This is a list of each of the responsibilities for each of those program assistants and which countries they support. So let's see, I don't know if it said, yeah, at the very bottom, on group 1 is Albania through Honduras. So anything that has to do with those countries is handled by Mrs. Maria Fernandez. Hungary through Nepal is Orlando Sippel, and then Mary Erickson handles Netherlands through the United Kingdom. So if you get an email, you may get an email, for example, from one of those individuals, depending on what country you're sponsoring, that says, you know, here's information about the upcoming icebreaker, here's further information about your officer or about the other sponsors that that would be beneficial to you. So you won't have overly frequent communications, but you should have some communications from one of these 3 individuals. Next slide. So I kind of covered this in that their IMSD is responsible. I mean, they're charged with full responsibility for this program. It's also talking here on the second bullet about their authorized dependents. So I know that's a question that will come up. With regard to the dependents, in past years, really before COVID, we would have seen not only the country list, but the officer's information, and likely, you know, whether he or she is married or single or geographic single, or how many children are going to be part of the program as far as accompanying the officer. But ever since the pandemic, we really only receive country information. We don't receive any family information. So even now, we don't know, you know, if someone's single or if they're bringing 7 children. So we do ask, you know, for your flexibility and handling whatever may come with regard to the officer and his or her family. One also important thing on here, significant and impactful changes in IMS administration. So there used to be escort privileges, meaning your officer could bring you on post and you didn't have to have an application, but there are no escort privileges any longer. So everyone who's age 16 or over does have to have a pass to get on post. And you can either get a day pass or a pass that's valid for a year. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next presentation. They also have limited access. They can only, it used to be that the officers could go, once they got an ID to be out Fort Leavenworth, they could go to any of the military bases in the US with that one ID card, but they can no longer do that. They own that the ID that they receive is valid only at Fort Leavenworth. And they also have to notify IMSD if they're traveling out longer or further away than 150 miles outside of Kansas City.
Sharon, you might go into the comments on anybody who's a hunter and wants to take their officer hunting.
Yeah, so that used to be something that was possible, but, and I forget how many years ago it is now, maybe upwards around 3 to 5 years ago. You may remember that Saudi officers that were here for study, similar to the Command and General Staff College, it wasn't from this school, but they went on to a base in Florida, I believe, somewhere, and 8 American officers were killed. And the policy about getting into bases in outside of Fort Leavenworth and the ability to shoot and or purchase firearms, that went away immediately. So an officer cannot go, a sponsor can't, that maybe has, you know, firearms and take their officers shooting for, you know, sport practice. That used to be something that was enjoyed between the sponsor and the officer. That is forbidden now, and you know, it's no ifs, ands, or buts. You can't, if they're caught firing or even, you know, possessing anything to do with a firearm, they will automatically be expelled from the program and sent back home. So the military is pretty strict on that. Next slide. So this is one of those where, you know, I don't even think you can read it up close. This was provided as, you know, where's your officer going to be living? So I think, you know, look at the slides after we could stop here for a second if you want to try to find your officer and see where they're living. But you'll get more information as we get a little closer. A lot of times too, they will, when they first come in, and most officers will come in on June 20th, so a week from today, they won't go immediately to their permanent home. They'll go to a hotel for a couple of days because their place may not be ready, or some of them could go directly. So it's a bit of a mix, but it's not uncommon for them to go to a hotel first. Next slide is the next group of officers and where their housing is. And then there's one more, group 3, or 1 or 2 more. Oh, this is it. Okay, next slide. All right, field studies program. We had a couple of slides already talking about this. David is the lead, and then Robert and Eric support Dave in the field studies program. And this just gives their hours and how to reach them. Next slide. So these are the events that are part of the field studies program. So about 40 events, and these are some of the key ones where they're gone a pretty long time. But Wichita trip, they take that, I think, in the summertime before they actually start the course. Fort Riley is, well, we'll see a schedule when we get to that slide. Then they go to Fort Riley and K-State, and then they do take a trip to Gettysburg and DC. Curriculum standards are applied to development, execution, and review. The course, the cost for any of those events is covered by IMSD. That's built into their budget. So next slide. These are the components of the field studies program, and the diversity and American life is where we fall. So the sponsor program falls under that. Next slide. So this is the network of support for the officer and his or her family. The Leavenworth Lansing sponsor is considered a civilian sponsor. It's not the Fort, but many of their sponsors are former military or retired military. So they run an American Organization course. They also have they run the English language program. They have a clothes closet, and they help the family kind of get settled in the community. So things that are in and around the Leavenworth and Lansing area, they provide assistance with. The Fort Leavenworth sponsor, I would say, probably has the heaviest lift, in that they, they're on post with their officer. They are responsible for making sure he or she keeps up with their coursework, getting them to the right place at the right time, bank accounts, insurance, maybe helping buy a car. So there's a lot of details, a lot more things than what our organization gets involved in. Doesn't mean you can't help if they ask you, but the Fort Leavenworth sponsors have more direct responsibility for that. And then they're also assigned a student ambassador. That's someone that's on post as well. That's, I think, a U.S. Army representative. They also help with classroom work and other, other needs on post for the student. The staff group is the International Military, that organization that we put up the org chart for. And then there's us in the upper right corner. So our job really is to show the officers what life is like outside of a military base. What is a typical Midwestern family live like? What are our activities? And so, we always say the best thing is to just include them in things you would do with your friends or family. If you go to a Friday night football game, see if they want to go along, or if you've got a birthday party, or any of your kind of regular everyday activities are things that we recommend to include your officer in. And so I'm going to speak a little bit about the one I skipped on all of these. You see that 3 of these groups, OI, or Operation International, us, and Fort Leavenworth, all say airport greeter. What we have done in the past is we as people sponsors have always recommended that you go to the airport when the officer arrives and make that initial meeting, say hello, and we usually suggest like a small welcome gift, maybe some snacks, or bottled water, or fruit, or something that sometimes they've been on really long flights to get here. Sometimes they're just coming from Defense Language Institute in Texas, in San Antonio, so that they've only been flying for a couple of hours. But it's just a nice gesture to make that first impression and meet your officer, and that way a lot of time doesn't pass by before you make the contact. You don't have to do that, but we strongly encourage it. It was not really allowed the last couple of years because of COVID. So this is the first year where we were allowed again to go to the airport. Now, after you greet each other at the airport. You could, if you want to, you could take your officer and his or her family onto Leavenworth, assuming you have, onto the post, assuming you have your LAC, or take them to wherever they're going to be. They're going to a hotel, et cetera. That you could do that, but typically people-to-people sponsors don't do that. It's usually done by one of the other two sponsor groups, because they usually live right at Fort Leavenworth or in the Leavenworth Lansing area. And so it makes more sense for them to just take them, back that direction where they live. If nobody shows up at the airport, none of the three sponsor groups, then the officer still has a ride to the airport, because the staff group, the IMSD, provides transportation for all officers. All they ask is if any sponsor, any of us three sponsors, Fort Leavenworth, Leavenworth Lansing, or us, Greater Kansas City, if we decide to take our officer on post, make sure you let the van, the IMSD group that has the vans, and they have signs, and they have folders and binders of information. We just have to let them know that we're going to do that. Otherwise, they're going to be looking for that officer and wondering what happened. So I've only done it once. Gary and I took our Polish officer to his, and I think he stayed at a hotel the first few nights. That's the only time we've ever done it in about 20 years. So that gives you an idea. And I think, some of our sponsors may have done it more often, but we, up until the pandemic, we almost always go to the airport to greet the officer. Does anyone have questions about that? I know I spent a lot of time on it, but. Okay, next slide. Let's see. Well, coordinate with your sponsor team. So yes, you will have two other sponsors, and that sponsor team is the three groups. Learn from seasoned sponsors, and any of us on this call, and anybody in the organization that are seasoned sponsors are more than happy to help answer any questions. And I mean, all of us were first year at one point, and I remember how I was kind of scared about doing something wrong. Was I gonna, break some protocols, or it's just a lot to learn and know, and you wonder if you're doing it right. So anyway, don't hesitate to ask any seasoned sponsors. They do ask that, here's talking about include them in your normal life and family events, and also sponsors or officers these days take a lot of trips when they have long weekends. They have spring break, they have 3-day weekends, 4-day weekends. Often they're traveling. So, stay in touch so you know what their travel schedule is, or where and when they plan to go. And also on the holidays, you may want to invite them for our holidays. So coordinate with the other sponsors. We always think it's best, if you can, to do things together as a team, but that might not be possible. And if not, then just get together on your own with the officer. They also ask, I remember Jim saying this at the event or the evening last Monday evening, that they like to have us contact our officer at least once a month by some means. In person, you don't have to do in person every month, but keep up by email, telephone. A lot of them use WhatsApp. You can do text messaging. They're what I would call the younger generation, most of the officers. So they're not really on email that much. The officer that we just sponsored, I think I sent one email to him all year, but we communicate a lot on WhatsApp and text and by phone. Let me speak a little bit about cost. So mostly on cost, if you do something nice for your officer or include them in things, which is very nice and very common, just be cognizant of do reasonable things. Don't spend thousands of dollars flying them to a vacation or, doing something extravagant, because then a lot of times the officers feel compelled to reciprocate, and sometimes they will be from a country where they don't have the means to do that. So we just ask for it to be, more modest and reasonable. And then the point on never be taken advantage of. I think Jim and Dave like to use the example of, babysitting. Your officer calls you and says, "Hey, we're going to Florida for the weekend. We're going to drop our kids off on Friday morning. We'll pick them up on Sunday." So that's absolutely not appropriate. If they ask to borrow money, that's also inappropriate. It asks you to buy a car for them. Anything that doesn't sound reasonable probably is not reasonable. If you do have a situation like that happen, please let me know, or you can also go directly to Dave or Jim to inform them of the situation. But it's it's important that it be addressed when and if it happens. And then the second to last bullet there, we recognize you. There is a sponsor service award program that's administered by IMSD, recognizing milestones of sponsorship. So first year, and then every 5 years after that, up to 30 years. So if you watch the recording from last week, there were a few sponsor awards that were handed out last week. And make lifelong friends. Often you will get an invitation to visit them in their country, which is quite nice. I think many of us on the call here that have sponsored more than 1 year probably have gotten an invitation to visit the officer. So, at first it's a sort of a more formal relationship between sponsor and officer, and then after a few weeks it probably becomes more like a friendship relationship. That's the hope and the goal. Any questions on this slide? All right, next. Some key dates. I mentioned June 20th. Again, that's I think the majority of sponsors or officers coming from DLI. And DLI, by the way, for those that are new, is the Defense Language Institute in San Antonio. So for those officers who come from a country where English is not their first language, they are required to have a certain level of proficiency, English language proficiency, before they can participate in this program. And so DLI is, I don't exactly know how many weeks, but I think it's around 8 weeks. So they have been, these officers that went through DLI, I think came in either February or March timeframe to San Antonio. And then next week, they'll come here directly from San Antonio. So they, even after taking that class, they'll have to, take a test to make sure that they are at the proficiency level that allows them to participate. They do what's called in-processing after they arrive on the 20th. And then there's a series of, he says here, mandatory briefings. They're moving into their housing, a lot of administration, orientation tours. And then they do prep courses before the program actually starts. And they also have some travel, some of those field studies programs traveling. And then the official start of the course is on August 8th. And that's marked by a flag ceremony. Sorry, Nancy, were you trying to say something?
No,
Oh, okay. The icebreakers fall in this, so I think there may be another slide with the icebreakers, so I'll talk about that then. ID card appointments. I'm not sure what on surge limitations. I guess this is really saying that, I don't remember what they said about this, but I think first priority is to the officer and then authorized dependents. So I guess it's issuance of their appointments for ID cards. The intent is to allow IMS to move into their permanent housing as soon as possible. and manage admin appointments. So I think this is really about their getting settled in housing, I believe. One thing that to mention on housing that they ask us to help support, there is between the American officers, which are around 1,200, and 124 internationals, there's not enough housing on post. So they have slotted, as you saw from those other slides, they have slotted people into housing. If an officer says, I really don't like that house, it's not up to my standards, or I don't like the way the kitchen looks, or something like that, that won't be a good thing, because they won't get offered another house. They either need to take it. I should say they won't get offered another house by the fort. They'll probably be asked to go find housing off post, like in Platte City, or Kansas City, Kansas, or Lansing. So it's very important that they take what's offered. And none of the houses are terrible. There's been a lot of building and improvements on post over the years, last 10 to 20 years. But in some cases, the reason I think they put this on here is in some cases, sponsors have said, oh, this place is a dump, you don't want to stay here. And then the officers thinking, okay, I need to refuse this. So they just ask us to, be supportive and try not to make any of those comments about don't live in this place. Next slide. Some more on this upcoming schedule. You can ignore the badge ceremony. That was for the officers that were leaving last Thursday. That took place. So for this upcoming class, icebreakers with sponsors and family. So if you have children and officers have children, this is the I think only event the whole year where families are welcome. So it's July 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th, and you see the breakdown there. So depending on which country you sponsor, that will be the night that you attend the icebreaker. Flag ceremony, the official start of the course is on August 8th. And then as scheduled now, the other items listed there are programs that are put on by IMSD. They're on the schedule to be in-person events, and we hope that they will be. The last 2 years during the pandemic, these events were all canceled. So we haven't had a food fair, a dinner dance, or a sponsor recognition ceremony in person since 2019. But if they decide to proceed forward, and there's 2 nights on these, so you will be invited. Like the way this works, let me just take a few minutes there to explain that. You choose at the icebreaker, you sit with your three groups of sponsors, sit together with your officer, and you decide then, okay, Joe and Sue Smith, do you want to go to the fall food fair, the holiday dinner dance, or the spring food fair? So you get to choose from one of those 3, and then whichever one you choose, then the other 2 sponsors go, so you work it out at the icebreaker. And then beyond that, like where it says holiday dinner dance, the 2nd or the 9th, that's going to depend on what, they'll split it out again by country. So if it's probably like A through L is on December 2nd, and the rest of the alphabet is December 9th. But we'll have more details about all that as it gets closer. First thing is, is it even going to be held in person? But these are definitely all sponsor events. You can, and same with the flag ceremony. You are welcome to go to the flag ceremony. It's usually on a Monday morning around 9 o'clock. So it's not ideal if you're going into an office working, but sponsors are invited. But again, on the food fairs, dinner dance, and sponsor recognition they're considered adult events, not for the kids, but the icebreakers are for kids also. Next slide.
Sharon, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Do you have a badge ceremony date for 2023 yet?
Yes, it'll be on one of the slides coming up. I don't remember it off the
Okay.
top of my head, but we'll get to it. So Jim will say, you know, the number one job, his number one job in his of all the things he does with this program is expectation management on all parts, managing our expectations as sponsors, managing the officers' expectations, roles and responsibilities of each, and then the same team is there. We are all on the same team. All of us jointly, IMSD, the OI sponsors, the Fort Leavenworth sponsors, the Greater Kansas City sponsors. Our goal is to help make this a really good year for the officer and his or her family. So, you know, that can be, and you'll hear this term if you're not new, or if you are new, make this the best year of his or her life. So it's the common phrase, this is the best year of their life in their military career. So next slide. Afghanistan was about, I think, getting the current officer resettled or settled in Kansas City. So that's nothing really that we need to spend time on here. Although Jim did say that both Afghan officers that are going to be staying in Kansas City are they'll be looking for jobs. And then Ukraine, there was going to be 3 Ukrainian officers. Then there was going to be just 3 in, you know, support recognition only, but not attending physically to the Command and General Staff College. And then what they ended up with was 1 Ukrainian officer that is going to be here in person. Next slide. Oh, that's it. No, I think there's the next part 2 is the next speaker, which last week it was Dave. This week it's me. Okay, this again is a bit of an eye chart, even close up, but Doran, let me find the answer to your question. It's going to be, let's see. Oh, it's probably on the next slide, but so all of the thing to remember on these slides is the red is something that sponsors are invited to. And you see that like black is their events for the officers, but not sponsors. Green is planned, extended academic and holiday breaks. Blue is no IMS or sponsors. And so the reason they put all this together, I mean, you maybe want to say, well, why don't they just give us the sponsor information? But it's important to know their schedule. So if you're reaching out to try to schedule something with them and they're in Fort Riley for 2 or 3 days, then you know to schedule around other things that they have going on. So that's the point of that. Next slide for more events. So the red, again, red is for sponsors. Let me just speak a little bit about Know Your World. Know Your World is where IMSD chooses, I think, about 4 to 6 officers, and they give an in-depth look at their country. They make a presentation, and it's about economics, culture, military, climate, hobbies, just a nice in-depth look at a particular country. And they compete for that. The IMSD selects who gets to take part in that Know Your World. And there will be, starting in September, and I think all the way through about March, but they take December off. So it's like September, October, November, and then January, February, somewhere in there. Well, you see the second one there is October, for Know Your World. So we'll get a schedule of that. It's usually at 3:45 in the afternoon at Fort Leavenworth. So again, that's sometimes not convenient for people that are working, but just know that you are invited to those Know Your Worlds. Next slide. Again, there's a schedule for the other Know Your Worlds. And then, so there's also a Hall of Fame where they induct past graduates into the International Hall of Fame. I think there was an event on the previous slide, and you see the spring one here, Spring International Hall of Fame induction. Those are nice events, and so sponsors are invited to that. If you're lucky enough to sponsor someone that from previous years that now is being inducted, it's quite a nice event and quite a nice honor for the officer. Graduation, Doran, or badge ceremony is June 8th next year. And the graduation, we don't encourage our sponsors to attend that. The badge ceremony is specifically designed for the office internationals only. So it's only 120 some graduates and the sponsors. So it's much more intimate, and you'll have time, you can spend time with your officer after the event. The graduation is everybody who's graduating. So all the Americans along with the international. So there's 1,300 people graduating and going through the ceremony. So you really won't get to see or spend time with your officer. Next slide. Oh, was that it?
That is it.
All right. While Sharon is teeing up the people to people slide deck, are there any questions?
Are you going to have, and you said the PowerPoint is available, will you be sending that out after this session tonight?
It's on the website.
It is.
Yeah, it's on our website, and it's probably easiest to grab it from there. But if you want me, I won't send it out like it's a big email to everybody. But if you specifically want it, I'm happy to send it to individuals.
And I apologize, but the website, I don't think I have that. Do you have that?
Sure. GKCPTP.org.
Okay.
Can you repeat that, please?
Sure, and I'll put it in the chat too. It's GKCPTP.org.
Okay.
Sharon,
Thank-
I wanted to add one thing too. In one of the slides that you shared earlier, it talked about sponsors being considerate of holidays and what the IMS students are doing during those time periods. But I think one thing that we have learned is that many of the students will have some very intense academic times as well, when they just don't have time to do anything social or to interact. And it might be good if we as sponsors think about their families during that time, or just kind of step back for a little bit. And I guess the only way you're going to know about that is to really have a conversation with your student. But that's really important, because very often if we call, they feel like they need to do it. They think that's something that is required of them, or would be bad protocol if they didn't. So just ask if it's a time when they are in an academic push period where things are just real heavy for them.
That's a good point, Joan. And those times in general, again, she has a really good recommendation to ask your officer specifically. But in general, the time, it's really the first, what I call the first semester. So when they get started in August up through December, when they have their break for the winter break, it's pretty intense. And usually I've had the officers have said the second semester, maybe the first part of it, like January, February, is still a little bit intense, and then it starts to lighten up when they have, I think, more like electives or something they have a little more choice over towards the end of the program. So in general, it's pretty heavy workload straight out of the chute after they after they get started. And the ideal time to do a lot of things with your officer is from the time they arrive until the flag ceremony. So June 20th, roughly, to August 8th is a 6-week window there where their workload is not as heavy. They have some things to do, but it's nothing like what happens, once they start the course. And that's a really good time to, get together with them 4 or 5 times if you can. Do things with them over our 4th of July, Independence Day. Then you've established the relationship, and it makes it much easier, for the rest of the year, really. And Deb, I see Deb has a hand up, and Joy maybe. Oh no, Deb, you had a question? Debbie Lane?
No, I don't have one.
Oh, you don't? Okay, I thought I saw, maybe it was me putting my cursor over your picture or something.
Oh,
Anybody else? Anybody have a question? Anyone else?
This is Eileen.
Hi, Eileen.
Okay, hi, a question. I was helping out my officer this past year and his lovely kids, and I got some extra coats for them. I wanted to ask about the loan office again, if they still need some things, like if I have a bicycle to donate or something like that. Is there another updated number to call?
I'm not sure what the number is, but I can off the top of my head, but I can get it for you.
Okay.
I don't know, Karen or Joan, maybe, do you guys know the who's in charge of the loan closet?
I do
thought
not
it
have
was-
a number, but I think Marianne Tennant has been very involved with that.
Okay, I'll find out. I don't know.
TNNANT. We've co-sponsored with them a number of years ago.
Yeah, I sponsored with them too, or Gary and I did. I'll find out, Eileen.
Last I heard,
Thanks.
she was still pretty involved with that.
Well, I just think it's a really nice idea. I'm into repurposing and like of all of us, and if they can use different items that we haven't thought of, I can just bring it out to the post and would be happy to do so.
Thanks, Eileen.
Thanks. Thank you.
All right, let's do mine is not as long. Let's do the sponsor briefing here. Go ahead, Sharon. All right, next slide. Okay, so this one, if you're new to People to People, we are a membership-based organization. And you see here of citizen diplomats who believe that international peace and understanding can best be achieved on a one-to-one basis. And these pics are from some past either events at the fort or events that we've held. So this program and, the sponsorship program is really the flagship program of our organization, but it's really an opportunity to interact for an entire year with international visitors. It's an opportunity to not only perhaps influence the officer and his or her family's thoughts about the US and about American life, but it's also an opportunity for us to learn more about their way of life and their country. If officers just watch TV, they may think that our typical Americans are like Kim Kardashian or I don't know, Gwen Stefani or so I don't know anybody that I interact with that lives their life on a daily basis like that. So it's a good opportunity to to influence and for us to learn as well. And personal development and enrichment, definitely. I think one of the more fulfilling parts of the sponsorship for me is just asking questions about how things work, like how do your schools work, and when you need health insurance or you need insurance for your car, or how does that work in your country? And so just some of the little things are the most fascinating to me about how things work in different countries compared to ours. Next slide. There's Karen and Chuck traveling to, where was this at, Karen? Do you remember?
Yes, it was actually in Russia
Oh, wow.
like 10 years ago. So we wouldn't probably be doing that trip this year by any means, but yes. A river cruise, St. Petersburg to Moscow. It was amazing. It was wonderful.
Nice. All right, next slide. So these items are over, right? This is for the class that just graduated. However, the events are still viewable, I believe, on the Army University Facebook page. So if you wanted to have a look at the ceremonies from last Thursday and Friday, you could have a look there at their Facebook page. Next slide. We've talked about this a little bit. Flexibility, I mentioned that as someone who is coming geographically single, and or somebody that's an officer that might be bringing 7 kids. But also it doesn't apply just to that. We've had to be, we as sponsors for all the organizations have had to be quite flexible with regard to changing rules with the pandemic, changing, there's still a little bit of 2 or 3 countries that we still don't know if they're coming. So, we just ask people to be as open-minded and flexible as possible. And then I talked about the airport. We do encourage people to meet at the airport, and we will provide, as soon as we know it, we'll provide the flight and travel information, but we've not been given that yet. So that will definitely be on my list for this week, since it's coming up next Monday. And then the icebreakers we talked about already. Next slide. Again, physical interaction is planned, but the conditions may cause changes. And then I talked also about the ideal time is between that June 20th and August 7th. That's when they will most need your help, but it's also the time to really get to know them. The flag ceremony we also talked about already, and we talked about the pace of the course, especially that first semester will be quite intense. So it's really a time when the officers that have most difficulty with English language, like maybe they've just squeaked by on their English language proficiency, it's really tough for them to keep up that first semester. Imagine if you're struggling to learn a language and then you're given a technical assignment and then you're given one the next day and the next day. So they can fall behind pretty easily, but that's part of the job of both the student ambassador and then their Fort Leavenworth sponsor to help keep them on track. Next slide. Okay, now let's talk about the LAC cards. So most of you have probably received, now for new sponsors, I'm going to speak to new sponsors. You've probably received an email from Pat Burnett asking you to complete the LAC application and submit it back to either to her or to me. So the LAC allows you to get on post for it's an entire year, but I'm going to caveat that just a little bit in a minute. You fill it out, we send it back to us, the first 2 portions of the application, just your information. The second section of the application is criminal history. After you fill that out, stop there, and then don't fill out the rest of the application. You don't sign it, you don't fill anything else out. Submit it back to Pat or myself. Then we'll send it on to the fort for processing. Once we get it back, we'll notify you that it's been approved, or of course, if there's any questions, we'll send it back if there's something that needs to be submitted or clarified or corrected. And then after you are notified, you have 30 days from the date that they approved it to pick it up. The processing time varies. This time of year, it's quite busy. So with all those officers leaving that just graduated, there's moving vans, there's all kinds of traffic going on post, in and out of post to get people moved out, to get new people moved in. And so all of those people, anybody who's going on post has to have an app or a pass. So it may take a little longer this time of year. If you have not submitted your LAC, please do so immediately, because we're only, 3 weeks away from the icebreakers. So if you can get your pass for the year, that would be the best. If you can't, if it's not done yet, then you can get a 1-day pass. But the hours of the VCC are 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. So, and the sponsor icebreaker will start at 6 p.m. So you can't show up on that day at 5 p.m. and say, hey, I want a day pass, because they're going to be closed already. So that's why we really encourage you to apply for the year-long pass, and then try to get that. We'll try to get it approved, and you should try to get it picked up then before the icebreaker, if at all possible. Next slide. So this is the link to where the application is. It's on our website. And again, that's what you complete, return it to us, we submit it. Next slide. There we go. Picking it up. That's the 30 days that I talked about. Occasionally their systems aren't working. And so we always recommend to call the VCC first, just to make sure their systems are working, because they have to take your picture and electronically create the pass. So call, and then sometimes they will tell you if your application is there waiting. Depending on which person you get, sometimes they'll say, I'm not allowed to give out personal information, so they won't tell you if it's there or not. We sometimes, to work around that, we can call Jim or Mike, and you would reach out to Pat or myself to do that. And then we can ask them, could you please check to see if this person's with the VCC, to see if this person's app is there and still waiting to be picked up. So, and if you miss the 30-day window, you have 2 more tries you have to reapply, and then it'll be approved again, and then you have to get up there again, and then in that 30-day window to pick up. If you miss all 3 times, then you're not allowed again to apply. So let me speak a little bit about the year. In order to help manage the traffic better, the amount traffic, meaning the amount of LAC card applications that get processed, IMSD has selected certain months of the year for different organizations. So it's much quieter in January and February than this time of year. So our organization's time is February. We are to submit all of our applications by, this year it was the end of January, so that by February 1st, they had everybody in our organization, and then they process them the month of February, and then we pick up. And that means then our pass is valid from end of February. So in this case, it'd be February of 2023 for a whole year through February of 2024. For those people that are new, or if for some reason you missed that February window, let's say you're applying right now, when you go get your pass, it's going to say, let's say you get approved and you go pick up in July 1st. Your expiration date will still be the end of February. So if you come on in that kind of, off cycle, if you will, to get everybody on cycle, everything expires the end of February. And then when you apply again the following year, you'll be good for a whole year. Does that make sense? Or does anybody have questions on that?
Sharon, do we have to reapply in January?
Yes,
Okay,
you will.
same form we did before.
Unless they change it. they provide it to us, so, you know, I expect it'll be the same, but, they do provide it to us, so if they make any changes, then we'll use a different form.
And Sharon, I missed that reapplication in February. So, but I just go on the website and apply as if I'm a new person.
Yeah, just apply right now and we'll
Okay.
get it submitted.
Okay.
Next slide. This is just a thank you for, I mentioned this at the beginning, but thank you for sponsors that are been doing this for 1 year or 25 years. We greatly appreciate the dedication, and you know, it's a volunteer and something that we give from our heart to these officers. So thank you for participating in the program. And any questions? I think that's it. I think I might have one more slide. Oh, yes, it is a chance to make a difference in people's lives. So this is a quote from Eisenhower. So we thought the two little kids usually can't stay apart, right? Questions? Other questions? I do want to mention the email blasts and how we communicate with our sponsors. We typically use MailChimp, which is an email blast program. You will see emails come from Zahid. It'll say president at GKCPTP. So it won't necessarily look anything like it's related to the military. But it does cover everybody in the chapter, and we don't have everybody in the chapter does not sponsor an officer. We do have some members who are members of the organization but are not sponsoring right now. So it'll usually be every 2 to 3 weeks. This time of year probably a little more frequent because there's so much activity going on now with the new, the one class leaving and the new class coming on board. But other questions or other comments? I feel like I went through it kind of fast, but is there any?
Karen,
Yeah.
it's Karen. Real quickly, we had so many new sponsors this year, which is wonderful. I had added most email addresses to MailChimp, but went back over things mostly today and added a few more. So I think everybody on this Zoom should be on there with no problem. If you do have questions or if you have an email change, please let me know or Sharon know. But I think all of you should be in pretty good shape there.
The last one that came out was either last night or this morning. Like I say, either like maybe around midnight last night or 12:30 or just after midnight this morning. So it was around that time frame, and it was just a reminder for this program tonight. So you might check your email and make sure that it's coming to you. And if not, if you didn't get it, let us know, and then we'll make sure we get you added.
And
Sure.
those that I added today, I did just forward that email to them because they.
Oh, good.
I think I got it around 11. It was timed around 11:30, Sharon, last night.
Okay, great. Yeah, Dorian.
Sharon, if we've gotten information about our officer, which I have, can we go ahead and reach out to them, email them, welcome them, and also ask if they're bringing a spouse and children? What can we ask at this point?
Sure. So let me just explain. The answer is probably yes, but I want to caveat it a little bit. If you are sponsoring from a country who's sending more than one officer, we have a little bit of a correction that we have to make with the other two organizations. So, for example, if you're sponsoring Azerbaijan and there's only one Azerbaijani, then it doesn't matter if Joe Smith from OI is sponsoring Azerbaijan and you are from our organization, and Sam Smith from the other organization, then the three of you have your information and you have the officer's information. But where there's multiple countries, some of the assignments that we made don't match what the other organization
Okay,
aside. So we've got to correct that, and we're going to do that this week. But
okay.
if you're,
Okay.
who are you sponsoring, Duran?
Somebody from Iraq.
Oh, you're fine then. So I think there's only one officer from Iraq. So
There is.
then, yes,
Okay,
by all means, reach out to your officer right away.
uh-huh.
If you have, I think there should be email.
I have an email address. So, and I guess my question is, it's okay to ask questions like, are you bringing a
Yes,
spouse and kid? Okay, great.
definitely. And the other thing too, it says it in the letter. If you haven't gotten a letter, or if you weren't at the briefing, you will be getting a letter in the mail. They were handed out in person at the briefing last Monday.
Mhm.
And it lists your country and the other two sets of sponsors, and then some other information about the link to find out all about your country.
Yeah, I actually
Did
got
you get
that
the
in an
letter?
email. Oh yeah, I got it in an email today.
Hmm.
So it's a letter. It says all of those things that you just said. I got it today. It's from a Robert A. SIV, U.S. Army.
Sharon, this is Joan. David Bourne sent his letters out by email late afternoon, and the actual email was from Robert Tapia.
Okay,
So
so that's, I'm glad you brought it up, because that could be confusing. So this is the letter that people to people, we also sent, handed out letters
Oh,
at the briefing.
yeah, I
And
haven't
so
gotten that.
yours will be coming in the mail, and that lists the other two sets of sponsors. So on the ones with multiple, there could be some corrections.
Okay,
The letters from those who were not at the briefing went in the mail Wednesday morning at the Parkville Post Office. So if you haven't received it yet, you never know with US Postal Service
Right.
these days. I know ours has been quite delayed lately,
Mhm.
but you should be getting that physically in the mail. Christine
Okay.
Rankin, I apologize because there was a glitch with yours, and I'm working on that.
No, that's not a problem. That's pretty interesting, actually. I wonder who they are.
Do we have?
The other
Christine's husband
Bradshaws.
is Tom Bradshaw, and we had
Yeah.
two Bradshaws, and
Yeah, they picked up.
the
on
letters got a little mixed up.
that. Yeah, no worries.
One new, one who had sponsored last year, and the volunteer did not realize that. So,
Yeah,
and I
sure,
didn't
no
catch
problem.
it in time.
So one other
We'll get
thing,
it done.
Duran, to continue with what you were asking about, also ask your officer when his or her flight is.
okay,
And then
okay,
let us know that, because we'll, we can share, well, and you can share it with your other sponsors, the other two sponsors. And
Okay.
also, we can share it with the port, because sometimes flight, they get the information, but sometimes flights change, right? And what they have does not match what is going to be real for the officer. So yeah, you're welcome to ask them, when they're coming, what flight they're coming on, if they're bringing a family, anything. And
that sounds great.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And then I'm going to put that website, most of you may have it or will get it if you don't have it, but let me put it in. This is the website that you can go to learn about about the country. It's CIA.gov, and then it's called the World Fact Book. That's it, I think. And it's really a nice site. You could read 20, 30 pages of information about the country, but it really gives quite a nice amount of detail. anywhere from, what's the average temperature, what's the average age, what's the population, what's the country known for industry-wise? Is it safe? What kind of government do they have? So I really recommend do a little homework before the officer arrives and read about the country. Let's see, am I missing anything? That's all I planned to cover, but any committee members, Joan, Karen, am I missing anything that you can think of?
I don't think so. I think I think you covered it beautifully and quickly. I wanted to add, for new sponsors, if you have any opportunity to take a day off work or out of your exercise routine or whatever to attend the flag ceremony, please do. It is an awesome sight to see our officers. The officer you'll get to know during the first few weeks they're here, to watch him or her walking across with their flag and then presenting it. And in the end, it is an amazing array of international flags. It just, and it's a kickoff to the whole year. So it's exciting. So go if you can. Sorry.
Absolutely
I get a little
agree, Joan.
emotional.
No, absolutely agree. Sharon, I think you covered it well. I can't think of anything else.
I have a question. This is
Yeah.
so if we don't get our LAC card in time and we wanted to go to the flag ceremony, and that starts at 9 o'clock, I believe, is there going to be how long does it usually take to get the day pass? Do you have to expect to wait an hour to get through it, or?
It all depends, but I would imagine, I've never tried to get one myself when it's, just before attending an event, but I would imagine the morning of the start of the program, I would probably allow at least an hour.
Okay.
I really appreciate that the Ford sort of forced us to move to that February schedule, because when I picked up mine back in, I don't know, early March or something, there was no one in front of us. We were in and out of there in 5 minutes, but I know that won't be the case this time of year. So if you can, bear it, plow through on this experience of getting a day pass, if you have to, it'll be worth it too.
So
it February schedule.
Do you think the chances are good if we send in our application tomorrow that we would have one by?
Probably, because it's still, are we 3 weeks out? Yeah, I mean, I think so.
Okay.
Can't promise, but.
Yeah, we'll try our best.
The flag ceremony, it said Eisenhower. Any address?
Oh, so it's going to be at the Lewis and Clark Center. Let's see. Well, we could get that for you easily enough. I don't think it's on. Let me look at the slides real quick and see. I don't think the address is on there.
Once you get on post, it will, there's signs to different destinations. So I think you can probably follow that, but.
Let's see, hang on a second. Flags ceremony.
But Marilyn, yes, you'll look for Lewis and Clark. The auditorium is called Eisenhower. Right. But if you check with me, Marilyn, or with Shotzi, we can guide you through some of that.
Here it is.
Address 100 Stimson Avenue.
Yep.
That's Lewis and Clark Center.
Yes.
Yes, once you get up on the base, there's signs for Lewis and Clark, and then the Eisenhower room.
The address is, I posted in the chat.
Sharon, that address you put up for the website for the country information was up for a few seconds and then disappeared.
I got it, Larry. I got it.
Okay.
It should still be. Let me do it again.
Thank you.
It's on the chat.
Yeah, if you click on the chat, you can see all of those comments made so far with Joy Snyder and Sharon and stuff.
Marilyn, I think I recognize you from the cabaret,
Yeah.
right? You probably helped me to my car with all those packages I bought. All those silent auction items that I bought.
That was great, Sharon. Thanks for supporting this.
Thank you for supporting Symphony.
Oh. All right, so I owe Eileen some loan closet information. And I think that's it. Is there anything else?
I'll ask a quick question, Sharon.
Yeah.
If your officer is scheduled to live off base, which it said on the list, ours is, I
Mhm.
mean, where is that typically? Is it an apartment or?
No, I mean, there's quite a bit of housing in the Leavenworth Lansing community for
So
officers.
it's usually around there. No one in Kansas City, for
Um,
example.
Not usually. I think
Yeah.
I had an officer from Singapore. They lived in, I think they lived in Flat City. They lived way out, I say way outside of the Leavenworth Lansing area, but they just wanted to. They didn't. They
Oh,
did a lot of social things in Kansas City on weekends, and they just he didn't mind driving every day into onto post. So, but most of the officers live in the
Pretty close.
Leavenworth Lansing.
okay, great.
And
thanks.
Christine, my officer lived at the Hampton Inn, right across
Oh.
from the base.
The
So
whole
for a
year?
whole year, loved it. Loved
Oh
having
my
somebody
God.
come and make up his bed, and he loved the
Wow.
continental breakfast in the morning. So there you go.
Wow,
Was he
well, that sounds
single?
like a good deal.
He must have been single.
Yeah, he was. He didn't have it.
Mhm.
Well, his family joined him for a month, and he said, no, I have more room here than I have at home. So
Oh,
there
wow.
you go.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Some of them live in the condotel, which is
Oh.
kind of like studio apartments. It's really
Okay.
nice.
Yeah, a
You know,
lot
they
of
have
the
several.
singles, what we call
Okay.
geographic bachelors, their families are not here for most of the year. We've had
I
that
see.
too, Marcos.
That's great. Great meeting.
Thank you all for attending, and
Sure.
you know where to find us. So if you think of some questions, that you forgot to ask today, or just anything that comes up, don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank
Sharon, I have one question.
Yeah.
I went to the website and I couldn't find slides. I see a YouTube video of the presentation, but I can't find the slides.
Okay. Well, I thought they were out there, but we can make sure they get posted out there if they're not there already.
Yeah, I see the video from the last week's live presentation.
Okay, well, thanks, Marcus. I'll take a note on that as well.
And thank you, Sharon, for making this available for those that couldn't attend or needed a little more
Yeah.
oomph and reminders.
Sure. Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest.
Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome. Bye now.
Bye.